Well, welcome, Henry Miller. Thank you for showing up this morning and talk to us. What I'm trying to do is interview some distinguished leaders over the years in exercise science and sports medicine, and when I was picking my list, you were right at the top of it. So
you're kind.
Thank you for coming. So I just wanted to start off with, if you could just sort of talk a little bit about where you're located now and what you're doing and so forth.
I'm at Wake Forest University. In fact, I've been on the faculty of the School of Medicine there since 1960, as a matter of fact. And this is in the town of Winston-Salem. It's still a small school of about 4,000 students or so. Currently, I'm an emeritus professor of cardiology, having become emeritus, I think, along about 2001. I continue to go to our rehab fitness program on a 3-morning-a-week basis, primarily for my own good, as opposed to, and I also kind of monitor it medically. And I go to the hospital at least one day a week, and usually to read electrocardiograms with the students and go to a conference or something of that nature. And that's kind of what I'm doing.
So you're keeping active?
Well, in a sense, yes, I am. Both physically and mentally, I hope.
Yeah.
That's right. And it's a nice outing for me. I'm a little more confined at home now with my family situation than I used to be, and so. But I've got some help there, and so I can get out and go a little bit more. This meeting being a good example for my first in the last 2 years. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could jump back in time now and talk a little bit about your undergrad days and your decision to go to medical school, and once you're in medical school, then residencies and then eventually how you got into the sports part.
In all this. Well, I went to a local high school in Statesville, North Carolina, and kind of thought about the sciences as such, I guess, even during that time. I had rheumatic fever as a boy, and I got a lot of attention from a lot of doctors, and I didn't really have much of a residual from it as it was. But so I went to college with the idea of maybe going to medical school.
Where did you go?
I went to Wake Forest University.
Okay.
At that time, Wake Forest was located in eastern North Carolina, down the other side of Raleigh, and so it was near where Duke and Chapel Hill and Raleigh, and so it was all there together. And then I went to medical school from there, and I went to medical school at Wake Forest Medical School, which was in Bowman Gray School of Medicine, which was in the town of Winston-Salem, actually. It had already moved up from a 2-year school to a 4-year school. So went there. Then after that, I went to the University of Virginia as an intern or resident and a little bit of a fellowship.
Was that in cardiology?
It was in internal medicine mostly at that time. Then I took all the cardiology electives that I could, which is part of the whole residency program. Went into the Army while I was there and tried to go everywhere. Ended up in Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
And when was this?
This was about 50, right at the end of the Korean War. This was about 56, I think I went in there. 54, yeah. And stayed a couple of years, like everybody did in that time. So I'd had about 2 years of residency when I got there, which.
So when you were in the Army, you already had your MD degree?
Yeah, I had my MD degree. I had 2 years of residency.
So did you practice then in the Army?
I was, I basically looked after sick call, read the electrocardiograms for the post at that time, and it actually was a post where recruits came into the Army. They got 10,000 recruits every 8 weeks.
And where was this?
This is in Columbia, South Carolina, Fort Jackson, Columbia, South Carolina. Very hot town, very hot town. But it was a good infectious disease experience, even though that wasn't my specialty. You know, you can't get 60 people with the mumps at one place one time, or 100 with the measles. Whatever you had, you usually had in numbers. We had a big Asian flu epidemic at that time. Polio vaccine came out that time, so we inoculated everybody. We had a lot of cases of polio. So it was an interesting time,
Yeah.
and probably the easiest time medically I've ever had, really, as a matter of fact.
Sounds challenging.
Well, it was. It was really challenging, but they wanted you to take your time off and do things like. So it was an interesting experience. I went back to Virginia for another couple of years, and went back to Wake Forest as a cardiology fellow, a research fellow, an NIH-sponsored thing, which was a nice opportunity to do work on some things. And
Yeah.
primarily, my research then had to do with shunt detection in the heart, where the holes in the heart and see where the oxygen flow was changing and things of that nature, and developed some of those things a long time ago. So in 1960, instead of going to Charlotte, where I'd planned to go to practice, I stayed at Wake Forest and joined the faculty then, thinking I was still going down there in about 2 or 3 years. Of course, by that time I was a cardiologist, and I was seeing the cardiology patients, and we were keeping them in the hospital, I thought, forever. It was about probably 21 days to 28, depending on how they got along. And so we had noticed that when we let them out of the hospital, they could hardly move. You know, they had a hard time getting around.
So this was bed rest pretty much
bed
for
rest.
20 days?
Well, the chair therapy was very radical at that time. Getting them up in a chair after about a week was really moving them along fast. But you didn't want to let them out of the hospital.
This was the late 50s?
This was the late 50s, the early 60s too.
Okay.
And we developed these rehab programs for the hospital. We had a good 14 days we could do things with them, educationally, activity-wise, and all. And so we went through a lot of that at the time. And actually, because of this disability, I went out to Wake Forest, which had come to Winston-Salem, the campus had been moved to Winston-Salem, and with my friend Mike Pollock, who had just arrived there not long before that. And I went out primarily to find a way that we could exercise these cardiology patients. And he convinced me we didn't even know how to educate older adults, which there wasn't much in the literature at that time. And older adults then were 35 years old, as opposed to this 50 to 75 that we had to deal with.
So older was over 35.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So where was Mike on faculty there?
He was on the faculty at Wake Forest University.
In physical education?
Yes,
or what?
Yeah, health and it was physical education probably then. It's health and sports science now.
Okay.
But
Okay.
And so we did a bunch of studies together to look at walking and jogging and bicycling, and 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, intensity ranging between about 40 and 80%, about 50 to 80%. To see what it took to train a person, say, who's currently my age, as it was. Well, we found out it took a long time if they hadn't been active, for one thing, but kind of settled on the 3 days a week at about 60 or 75% of intensity, and for about a 30 to 45 minute period of time.
Now this is for so-called normals. This was
people. Yeah, we tried to screen out all the cardiology patients initially, and then after about 2 years or 3 years of this, we began to get a few people with some of my patients who had heart problems into the mix a little bit. And that kind of developed into the cardiac rehab system that we set up in about 72 and 73, and got a grant to spread it around North Carolina and other sites from the, I guess, the vocational rehabilitation people.
So you were right in the era when, well, like you said, even the chair was sort of a radical thing.
Well, that's right.
I mean, can you imagine? I'm trying to think what they thought about having these people exercise.
Well, it
must have been.
It wasn't popular.
That's what I wondered. Yeah.
It was a matter of as we got it going, and we had a little experience in a year or so where people were not dropping over dead like it was predicted.
Right.
Then we would go to other towns and talk to them about setting up programs, and we had a little seed money to get them started. And fortunately, we were educating people in our institution in a master's program in physical education, who were going out and being the people who ran these programs. One great example is many of them, Reed Humphrey being one of our first people who developed a program in Raleigh, stayed in the system for all his life and got his PhD at Pittsburgh, I think, and went on further with developing these things with many programs.
Were there other programs starting up at the time, or did some of them other ones branch off at other universities?
Well,
using your model. Or?
Well, basically, it was a model, and we worked at. We had a in-hospital model that we created at the University of North Carolina. This was all of us working together on this, and Duke got involved in it, and they had one of the early programs. And so we spread it around the state of North Carolina. Now there are about 70-some programs in North Carolina, a lot of different cities. But it was just a model of not just exercise, but dietary considerations, doing psychological testing on them, kind of overcome the depression that occurs with those things. And it was kind of a get you back to life and back to work and back to activity type of programs, really.
Looking back at the 50s, I think of somebody like Paul Dudley White and his treatment of Eisenhower after his heart attack and so forth. Did that have any bearing on what you guys did? I mean, that was pretty groundbreaking too. You know, he was all in favor of exercise and.
Well, he was in favor of getting
them up and
into the chair. You know, that was, as I say, it wasn't. And Eugene Stead, who was a professor of medicine at Duke, and had done some studies by doing cardiac output type of estimates with people lying down and sitting up. You know, ventilation in the human is much better sitting up than it is lying down, because you can use your chest better. It didn't bother the blood pressure, didn't fall out the bottom like was predicted, and all these things. So that type of information encourages to get people up further. Well, you must realize this had gone from initially about 6 weeks in the hospital, down to a month, down to 21 days, and that stayed that for a long time. 14 days was pretty radical to let them out, and now they go home in about 4 or 5 days, you know. So it's quite a contrast what it is. But so we moved all our in-hospital educational process and all then into the outpatient arena. We try to get them in the rehab programs about a week or so after they get out of the hospital, which is about 2 weeks after their infarct. So, and the same thing is true of the bypass surgery people and now the angioplasty people and things of all that.
I noticed the same trend with childbirth too. You know, the women were in bed for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, or whatever. And
that was to keep them from having to look after the child.
Somebody
else was taking it over.
The dad can do that.
That's right.
Well, Henry, when did you find out about the American College of Sports Medicine?
Well, I found out through Mike Pollock, as a matter of fact, and we were at that time, we began to start the committee to look at ways that we could educate folks to work in the rehab system, in the medical end of it, as opposed to, the fitness system came along a little later. So we all met, about 17 or 18 of us in Aspen, and Mike took me along at that time. I was one of about 3 or 4 physicians involved in this 18 people, which include most of the people you know and probably a half of the vice. A third of it, 2/3, well, a third or a half or 2/3 were probably have become presidents of the organization.
Those were very important meetings.
It was, and that kind of got me, you know, thinking more back into the physiologic situation of exercise as opposed to just the cardiovascular things, and kind of grew out of that. But he introduced me to it, and I guess I went to my first meeting in the 71 or 72.
And that was Bruno Balke's
son had the
had the inn there or whatever.
Right. Bruno was very much involved in this thing. And you know, in 75, then we started the examinations, the practical and the written exam, and we wrote questions and we did everything. I was pretty well convinced at the end of our second year, where we were writing all the questions, that nobody could pass the test except the people sitting at the table. And to some degree, that was true.
I'm trying to think of the guy he ended up at Penn State. Oh, Carl.
Carl Stedefall.
He was involved.
Carl was very much. He and John Faulkner were very much involved in this whole thing early on too.
I'm going to talk to John Faulkner later today.
Oh, you are. That's great. That's great. So. Yeah, I'm glad he came. I know he has a few problems, but he was very much involved in this. Carl was, and we had the group out of Penn State, the group out of Michigan. We came, I don't know, just many representations. Jim Skinner was there, Bob, Jack Wilmore, a whole group of folks.
Yeah, all of those people went on to be president of the college.
And then the physicians that I knew well was Sam Fox, who was at Georgetown at the time, and Bob Corliss came from Penn State. So just a few of us, of course,
So you become president of the college in the early 80s, around 81.
Did. I came to the meeting. Mike left and went to Dallas to Cooper Clinic. And Paul Ribisel, who was one of Mike's old friends and colleagues at Illinois, they were there together, came and worked in his position. And Paul's been a great asset. He's really a good teacher, and he's been the chairman of the department at Wake Forest now for about 15 or 16 years.
Which department is that?
Department of Health and Sports Science. Well, it's been there for a number of years, and so he's, by having that in that department there, where we were dependent on them for space and everything else for all our rehab and fitness programs, and it worked out. And a couple of years ago, we were able to round up enough money to build a center outside of the gymnasium where we'd been for years, and occupying it from 7 till 9 o'clock every morning, and have a little easier time for the patients. And
so did that work? Did you pull that off?
Yeah,
separate center.
It's been in existence now. This probably is the 3rd year, so it worked out very nicely. We have it we share it with other studies in the department in that department there, but it's built out in the open close to the stadium where parking is easy and to do that. So that's been a great asset to keeping people going.
So did you meet Paul through ACSM?
I met Paul through ACSM. In fact, I interviewed him to come to Wake Forest at the Seattle meeting about 72 or 73 at the time. And that's where I guess that's where I first met him. He was at Kent State then with Larry Golding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, before Larry went out to Las Vegas.
So,
so my presidency I think they didn't have anybody else at the time. I mean, they were out of positions. They didn't have coming along seriously. Because I tell you, if I'd have known as much about the college before I was president as I did after for many years, I may not have done the job either.
Swen, you've been very, very active ever since.
Well, it's kind of I don't go to the heart meetings like I did for years and years. I don't really go to the clinical research meetings, which used to meet down here every year, and I used to come there. But as much as I just go to this meeting, and then the AACVPR, which was kind of a spin-off of this group, as you remember.
What does that stand for?
That's the American Association of Cardiovascular Pulmonary Rehabilitation.
Okay.
And it kind of was formed out of a lot of people here, as a matter of fact. Yeah, it really was. And because we were getting into this business at that time of trying to evaluate and certify that people were capable of working in programs. The nurses were very much involved in too.
Yeah, there's that. The ACSM certification program has been so important.
It has
over the years, and the other thing, in the little bit of time we have left, I wanted you to comment on too, was the foundation. Yeah. The ACSM Foundation.
Well, that kind of came as we moved to Indianapolis, and we, the town was very gracious to us, as you know. We got the grants we got, I guess, property from Stokely, grants from Lilly and the Cranert Foundation and all. And we, as we begin to look at things, we were a dues-supported organization. And an annual meeting and the dues were about it. And it was kind of plateauing off. We were growing a little bit, but not dramatically. And so we felt like if we were going to do any research out of this, or be able to even do something with the research that was being done by all the members, that if we had a foundation to have funds to fund researchers for the most part, and do that, then it would be very helpful. So that at that time, and that was long about the time we moved the organization down there. And we went and talked to Bill Stokely, as a matter of fact, who'd been one of the big givers to get us there, and who had a foundation and looking into things, and kind of talked to us about it, how good it would be, and it depends on how you position it to get money into it. And of course, the Kellogg, or the another Quaker Oats company.
Oh, yeah.
This guy came on our board. They gave us, well, I think we asked him for $2 million. We got about $500,000 or something.
That's a good start.
It was a very good start. Yes, it was. And we went to people with hat in hand. Anything you give us, we think we can do. And assured them that we had people in this organization that could do any kind of research that they thought was important. Kind of let them within our guidelines, which was pretty broad as far as exercise, research, science. If they wanted money spent in immunology, or they wanted to spend in gas exchange or heart rate response.
There
was somebody there that could do that, yes. And that was kind of our selling point to get the money. Lilly Foundation gave us a good bit of startup type things. And people who didn't want to give to bricks and mortar came forth to the foundation. And as we were going back and asking some of the same people again, about funds that we'd asked for the funds for the organization.
I know out in the entryway of the building in Indianapolis, there used to be on the wall they had the recognition.
Yeah.
Was that building fund, or was that foundation, or was that both?
That was probably building fund, I think. It may have been a combination. I've forgotten how much was up there.
Yeah.
But the foundation then began to grow. We got a lot of good corporate members in, from Reebok, from Mars, who's now kind of recycling, come back. But a lot of them, we would just take off in a trip, and usually a lady named Linda Benjamin, who was the executive. Linda. And the two of us would go, or maybe three of us would go and visit these companies and talk to them about what we could do for them. They didn't have any, and we'd end up getting money from them, and the foundation would take their percentage, to keep it going too. So most of the money they gave us would be spent on the project that we designed, or they designed, or what they were desirous, and the rest of it, then a percentage of it stayed in the foundation. That's the way we built the endowments. Big gifts like from Ralph Poffenbarger, for instance, about $125,000 if he got his own award, and
I remember.
And then we matched that, so that gave us that much into the endowment.
Did the foundation start giving grants early on, or that probably came a little later?
It came a little later because we felt like we needed to have a certain base there to spin off, and we wanted to give the income off of that money as opposed to the principal itself. To some degree. Some of it, so the monies that were retained in the foundation to build up the various educational endowment, the research endowment, and then the separate endowments that have come in since, with Carl Gisolfi, and the clinical research grants and things came in, not grants, but monies came in a little later. That's one of the things we're trying to build up right now. So written another letter to try. I'm not sure why I'm still in there, really. People rotate in and out.
Well, you're the mainstay. That's why you're there.
Well, I guess I'm
You understand it better.
Let's don't do this again. It lost money last time type person.
Yeah, that's historical perspective.
Yes. My memory's going, so everything seems old now.
So anyhow, we've got about a minute left, Henry, and I just wondered if you with this great perspective that you do have, if you could comment on sort of where ACSM is now and how you've seen it change over the years.
Well, it's changed. It's grown. I think the three basic components of the basic science, the education, and the medical end of it are still intact. We've got a lot of members who are so-called associate members who bring up our numbers. I think we need to look very carefully at that we don't lose the basic group.
Yeah.
Because without them, we're not going to be able to sell projects to foundations and things like that to get money in. Numbers are nice, but I think you need to look at the quality of what's there.
And you need that core of quality.
You absolutely do. And if you don't, if you're losing those, the Physiological Society and the other organizations, I've looked at ACSM as always being someone's other organization they belong to.
Because you have a sort of a specialty group.
That's right.
And then you have ACSM.
That's exactly right. The people in ACSM are interested in exercise as a therapeutic modality like I was, and like there's Bob Solis is looking at this, he's got these new buttons, exercise is medicine. I could pick one for the South and change the wording a little bit, but anyway, it would be. But I think that's the way we need to do, to convince the world that, you know, this is part of your therapy.
Yes.
I mean, you can get another pill going, but this is really, and the information we got and the data to support all this is right there.
It's strong.
And it's been there for a long time, too, you know. It really has. So I would like to see us push that whole envelope, really. And if associate members and things like that are pushing that envelope, then that's good. We can, maybe we ought to kind of really look at our core pretty well. Because I think but I think pushing it and being sure that the world knows how important it is to be physically active. And you don't have to run, you don't have to run marathons, you don't have to do anything. That's right, get up. Get up and go. That's right. And that's been another thing. I think the studies that Mike Pollock did early on, you know, it looked like no training whatsoever, but these people got much better. And they stopped drinking as much in the afternoon, as one wife told us, and all these kind of things, these good things happen.
Major change.
That's right, that's right.
Okay,
that's
Henry,
right.
well, thanks so much
well,
for
you're more
coming
than
by.
welcome. I enjoyed it.
Appreciate it immensely.
Good.